Hi, my name is Dorian, and this is You, Me, and the Industry. A podcast where I get to hang out with people from the games industry and talk with them about their job, the industry, and a bunch of other stuff. Today I'm happy to announce the very first podcast special. The next upcoming episodes are all going to be related to the book Press Reset by Jason Schreier. The book tells the stories of game developers and what happens to their lives once the studios they've worked on for years get closed. Joining me this time is Zach Mumbach, former producer at Electronic Arts on games such as Dante's Inferno, Dead Space 2, and a cancelled Star Wars game called Project Ragtag. In this very personal interview, he gets into his passion for skateboarding, reflecting on his journey as a game developer, working with the legendary Amy Hennig, being a workaholic, and how the games industry needs to evolve. Please enjoy. Hello everyone and welcome to the show. This episode I'm joined by Zach Mumbach, who is a former producer at Electronic Arts. He worked on games such as The Sims, The Simpsons game, Battlefield Hardline, Dante's Inferno, Dead Space 2 and 3, and the cancelled Star Wars project called Ragtag. He currently works at the indie studio called The Wandering Band, which in 2020 released their game Airborne Kingdom. Zach, welcome to the show.
Hey Dorian, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
How are you doing these days?
I'm doing good. Like you said, we have Airborne Kingdom released last year. We're working on console ports, but that's not too much heavy lifting for me. So it's enjoying the summertime with my kids and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, I'm really glad that I got you on here because these next couple of episodes will be all related to one topic, I guess. It will be all related to the book by Jason Schreier called Press Reset. I will already have talked about this in the introduction a bit, but I'm really glad to have you on because I thought it was really, really interesting to especially read your story because like once I read your story, I was like, wow, I need to I need to follow this person on social media because I was like a real I don't want to say underdog. It was like really you were really I was really championing for you because it sounded like wow, like you really went through the ringer in the end.
Yeah, and I would say it's interesting. No one's really asked me about that book, but I've gotten a lot of like people reaching out, unexpected. I guess I just didn't think people would reach out to me, on Twitter or whatever. And
right.
Just kind of a lot of people sending like really nice messages about hearing my story or I'm rooting for you or stuff like that, which has been kind of, for me it's like a big surprise. I've never been like a public figure. Not that I'm a public figure now, but
right.
It's like people reaching out and that's been cool. Just kind of meeting new people and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, like I said, it was awesome to hear about all the stuff you went through. But before we dive deeper into the book stuff, it is courtesy here with You, Me, and the Industry to bring a guest topic to the show. And we already discussed this, and you have a topic, and it will be skateboarding. And I know you're a big skateboard fan, and you've been skating for 20, 30 years. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, skateboarding. I've been skateboarding, since I was a kid, rolling around when I was like 10 years old. I'm about to turn 40, so I guess that's 30 years.
Crazy, wow.
I definitely have taken breaks or whatever, but
yeah,
it's been really, and especially kind of going through all the stuff with, Visceral closing, all the stuff that kind of got outlined in that book.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of my like thing that I get to do that, when I'm skateboarding, I'm not very good. I have to like fully concentrate on what I'm doing when I'm riding a skateboard. I can't be thinking about, work or family or any other thing. It's very much I have to be 100% present and really focused on what my feet are doing and how my body is balanced and all that. And so that's why I like it so much. Is it's almost like meditation in a way. It's a way to like escape for 20 minutes where I'm just not thinking of anything else other than not falling on my head and hurting myself.
Right. Yeah.
And I have a little skate bowl in my backyard here that I built back in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And when I built it, at the time I'm 38 years old and I've got like concrete trucks coming out to my house to pour this and I'm kind of like second guessing myself like, man, what am I doing? Like I'd be spending this money and all this time and effort on building my own personal skate bowl. And then COVID happened and I skated in that thing every day and like mentally it really helped me deal with the sort of isolation and not being able to go out and all that stuff, and just being able to go out and skate in my backyard every day. So I'm really, in the end, I'm really, really glad that I did it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's actually pretty cool to hear. Like, I'm always interested in what people did with like their now, I guess, gained free time, or like, yeah, I guess restricted free time otherwise, and what people did with their time and how they sort of evolved and how they, yeah, made the best out of this like pretty terrible situation. And I saw that you have like a pretty good like I wouldn't call it collection, but you have like a couple of decks at home, and you also had like a couple of Star Wars decks at the office. So like, does it make a difference when riding like one of your cooler decks, or is it more just like you buy it and then you forget about what it looks under like underneath it?
Yeah, no, funny enough, so some I just buy for the art.
Right.
I've always been like, and some of it is like they very much do the like skateboarding does the like retro thing. They're constantly bringing graphics back
Right,
from
yeah.
like the 90s. And the trick is like you feel that nostalgia. Oh, that's like the graphic I had when I was a kid. I gotta buy that, and like put it up on my wall or whatever. When you're actually skating, technically the graphic on your board doesn't matter, right?
Right,
You're not
yeah.
looking at it or
Exactly.
whatever. But it's the same, like skateboarding is very much like a weirdly tied into fashion. Like there's a lot of like fashion in skateboarding, and the clothing, skateboarding clothing sells a lot, and skateboarding shoes, sell a lot beyond like people that actually skateboard.
Right.
I think all that matters in a weird way. There's this thing that skateboarders will say, which is like, look good, feel good, skate good, right? Like if you look at the bottom of your board and it like looks cool, like the graphic is cool to you and it gets you excited, then like you're gonna skate better just because you're mentally like hyped up.
Right, yeah.
So I always try to have a graphic on the bottom that I'm excited about, for sure.
That's awesome, yeah. And yeah, you just mentioned you were like turning 40, or you've already become 40. And yeah, what is it like to like see now the next generation? Like, for example, when you skated like all together skate park, like what is it like to see like the younger kids like? And does it make you like nostalgic when you were like younger and starting out?
Yeah, it does. It's honestly, it's way better now. Skateboarding has become like this really inclusive kind of thing where like, hey, anybody can come skateboard and you're welcome,
Right.
and that's really awesome. That's not the way it was when I was a kid. It was much more like there was a lot of gatekeepers in skateboarding. When I started skateboarding, I was like 12 years old, 10 years old, and then you had the teenagers that are like, you're not cool enough to skateboard, or whatever. You need to like be wearing this, or it was very much like fashion police type deal,
Right.
back in the 90s. And so like I think skateboarding is in a way better place now. I just think it's more accepting, and it's more about, hey, if you don't fit in anywhere else, come on over here and you'll fit in.
Right, yeah. I think it also sort of went through like a recession in the sense of like the culture. So I think back in the day it was much more like edgy in my sense, and like people wouldn't wear like any like protection gear or anything. And I think nowadays it's more like, I guess, more cool enough to wear like a helmet or something in case if you're younger or something.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think now you have like professional skateboarders that came up when they were kids,
Right, yeah.
and there's all this footage of them out there wearing helmets and all that,
Right.
and their parents are involved, and it's like, it used to be like a rebellion thing,
Right, yeah,
You skateboard
totally.
because your parents don't want you to skateboard, and now the parents are involved. It's in the Olympics, right? Like it's in the Olympics now.
True,
So it's
true,
kind of
yeah.
gone mainstream, which I think it's a good thing. Skateboarding is awesome, and I'm not one of those people that like, hey, I found a fun thing to do and I want to keep it all to myself, right?
Right,
It's
yeah,
like,
totally. Unlike games, which are exclusively for us. And yeah, like I said, good segue. And yeah, loved hearing your stories about skating and all the great mentality behind it. So yeah, let's kick it off. So yeah, how did your story end up in the book?
Yeah, so that's a funny story, and I actually haven't told this story. So
That's great.
basically, I was working at
Exclusive.
Visceral Games. Yeah, this is exclusive here. I was working at Visceral Games. We were making, as you mentioned, a Star Wars game. The studio was closed down for whatever reason, politics beyond me. And when the studio closed down, I think a day later, maybe 2 days after the studio closed down, there was an article, and it was on Kotaku, and it was about inside the closing of Visceral Games.
Right. Yeah.
And it was basically like, Jason had written it, and it was kind of behind the scenes look at what happened, and he had sourced a bunch of people, so he got a bunch of kind of people to speak anonymously about what was going on there. I read the article. I felt, number one, I disagreed with some of the things that were said in the article by some of the people,
Okay.
and I also just felt like the article was digging into like a lot of gossipy kind of inside drama about
Right.
this person not getting along with that person or
Mm-hmm,
whatever,
mm-hmm.
and the failures of the production team or the scheduling team or whatever, right? And
Right, yeah.
so I felt like, man, you put something out like this, we all have to go get jobs now, and you put
Right.
something article out that kind of makes us look bad, and then
Mm-hmm.
I got to go interview for a job, and they're like, hey, I heard production was dysfunctional on your last game.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
oh, that right, that's a tough question, and that did happen.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, and I'm glad that was at Facebook, and I'm glad that I didn't work at Facebook.
Okay.
So I reached out to Jason, and I shouldn't say reached out. I like replied to a tweet, and I don't know, I called him a name or something. I don't remember what I said, but it wasn't nice.
All right.
I was like,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't nice. And so he reached out and was like, hey, I stand by my reporting. Would love to talk to you though. And so we got on the phone, and I will say that he really heard me out and was really respectful of my position on that phone call. And that phone call wasn't for an article or a book or anything. It was
Mm-hmm.
just him talking to me. And we were on the phone for a while, and maybe over an hour, and we kind of dug into it. And then I don't know how long it was later, but he kind of reached back out and said that he was working on some stuff about studios closing and wanted to talk to me some more. So my whole thing is like, I will not talk to anybody off the record. I don't like that. Like, if I
Okay.
have something to say, I'm going to put my name on it.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's like a whistleblowing situation. If
Sure.
I worked for a corporation where employees were being abused or something, then
Right, yeah.
okay, cool. But if it's like gossip, or if someone wants to know my opinion about Amy Hennig or whatever, I'm not going to do that anonymously. I'm
Right.
going to put my name on whatever I say.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a hard time with the anonymous thing, and he was like, hey, do you want to talk on the record about some stuff? So we talked, and then we talked again, and then over the course of a few conversations, he kind of mentioned, I'm doing a book, and there's going to be a chapter Visceral, and then it became like, hey, I'm doing a book, and there's going to be a chapter about you. So by the time I knew that there was going to be a chapter specifically about me, we were kind of done talking. I had kind of like put it all
Oh,
out there.
okay.
So it definitely was kind of a test of my, I'm trying to make this stand of like, I don't speak anonymously, and, I'll put
Sure.
my name on it. And then he's like, cool, I'm going to put your life story in this book. It's like, okay,
Welp.
well, here it comes, right? And I mean, that's basically the way it came about. It came about me, upset at him on Twitter and calling him names on Twitter, and then a bunch of phone calls later, I ended up having a chapter in this book, which is cool.
That's actually a really funny story. Yeah. I mean, usually it doesn't go like that in the in the days of the internet. Usually it's more like, well, like I hate you, and then there's like a long Twitter thread about like name calling, and then both will be muted, I guess, for each other.
Yeah, and I'll say that like the credit goes to Jason on that, because I wish I ended up deleting the tweet,
Okay.
but I wish I could see it, because I definitely I wasn't nice to him,
Right.
and like probably the thing to do would have been just to mute me,
Right. Yeah.
or block me or whatever. But I think his feeling was like, hey, this is like, I think that Jason really does care about the people that work in the industry,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and so I think that his reaction to me was like, hey, this is a person that like I wrote an article, and right or wrong, this person was like hurt. This
Right.
person who worked in the industry was like hurt by my article.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't think he just wanted to make it go away. I think he really wanted to like dig in and talk through it,
Mm-hmm.
which I really appreciated. I think oftentimes I've found that like journalists in games media, they don't really want to talk. They'll have an opinion or something they want to say, and they don't necessarily even want to hear from the developer on, their perspective of that. So Jason
Right.
taking the time
Mm-hmm.
to listen to me rant and rave about, my thoughts on it was cool. Cool of him. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, what was it like reading your own story in the book, and then also maybe like some of the others? Like, did it make you like self-reflect on your journey, or was it more like sometimes it is when you put something on paper, it's like, wow, like this really was a ride, or is it more like, yeah, I guess it's pretty accurate, and I'm kind of proud how it went, or I'm now at a better place or something?
Yeah. I don't know. Right. Like, I don't know how I feel about it. Like,
Yeah.
reading it all, it's like I definitely feel like I'm in a better place now,
Mm-hmm.
and like the way that things went, although not ideal at the time, worked out really good
Mm-hmm.
long term for me.
Yeah.
It's really weird reading your own like quotes, like things you said, and then like, does that sound, like to not be as self-conscious about that. I think it's more so with like things like this.
Mm-hmm.
Like I probably won't be able to listen to this when you put this out. Like just
That's
hearing
fine.
my voice talk
Yeah.
is like it's hard to listen to myself. Reading is a little easier because like okay, I'm just reading it. Much more interested in the other stories in the book,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, because like these are new stories for me, and I think it makes you realize like how similar a lot of people's journey in the industry are, and kind of the concerns that people have outside of like the specific to the game concerns, but just the bigger life concerns with like having to move around and job stability and all that.
Right. Yeah.
It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of, it's I shouldn't say it's not the right word, but it's like cool to see that other people, have similar experiences or feel the same way or whatever. I don't think cool is the right word there, but
Right.
interesting, I guess.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, overall, it was, it's a good book, and it's even if I hadn't been in it, I would have read it for sure.
Yeah. And was there like a chapter you were like, wow, like I can't believe this really happened? Like, do you have like a favorite chapter?
It's not a wow chapter, but my favorite chapter is the first one, the Warren Spector chapter,
Mm-hmm.
just because of the sort of like a little more peek into like he was involved a little more in like making deals and the business side of thing. I
Yeah.
was very much isolated from that at EA. I was just involved in like making the game,
Right. Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
so like hearing like especially like when they were talking about he wanted this particular enemy from some early Disney show, and like they had to make a deal where they like traded IP for something else, and like knowing that like those kind of deals happen was like I don't know, just kind of cool to hear.
Yeah. Totally. I also thought this was really, really interesting. More like also the struggle, or like also like I don't know if the word is accurate, but the desperateness of like just trying to make like a game, but it's like he has to pitch here and there and needs to convince other people of giving him money and stuff. It's I found it really, really interesting.
Dude, in a weird way, like encouraging, only
Yeah,
in that like, hey, this is like Warren Spector, and he kind of has to go through the same,
true.
you know what I mean? Like I would assume, and it's a wrong assumption that like when he walks in and says, hey, I want to make this game, someone just hands him a check and says, go make it, and
Right,
and
yeah.
that's not, you read his story and it's like, okay, that's not the case. It's actually like he's dealing with the same crap we're all dealing with as far as how to pitch and
Mm-hmm.
dealing with the all that stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, your chapter is called Workaholics. So yeah, do you think the title is accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's definitely like my personality,
Mm-hmm.
is like sort of I like to like get into something and obsess over it, and that's still the way I am even with Airborne Kingdom. It's not like I was working clean 8-hour days, 9 to 5 or whatever. It's like I'm up really late, and I'm working a lot of hours, and I want to make it as good as I can, and I can't really like go do anything else anyway.
Right.
It's like, hey, let's go for a hike. Okay, and then I go for a hike, and the whole time I'm thinking about the mechanics of the game or the story of the game or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, and that's a problem I knew I had. I think that stepping away from EA and you know taking like a bigger look at it, the real problem is that like I'm doing that for this corporation that's making a bunch of money, and
Right.
I'm not being like rewarded for it.
Yeah, fairly compensated. Yeah.
It's not only that, it's like if you give something to someone over and over and over again, something extra, that extra becomes the expectation,
Right.
right? Like, oh, this guy like really, and maybe that's why I get like promoted or I get new positions on new
Mm-hmm.
games. Because like, well, this guy works so hard, so like let's move him up and put him in charge of this. And so like you have that expectation that you're kind of being taken advantage of. It's like this company is making millions and millions of dollars, and I'm not getting paid. I'm on a salary. I'm not getting paid overtime. EA paid me really well, but
Mm-hmm.
still, it's like the difference now is that, okay, I work on a game that I own. And so all that work that I put in theoretically sells more copies. And then those more copies mean I make more money from it. And so it's more about like, hey, I have to harness that that workaholicness, but like for myself versus for some corporation, you know?
Right. So, my follow-up question was like, how did you stop? But it seems that you just redirected it would be the more accurate word, I think.
Yeah, and I think that I'm because I work at home now, it's
Mm-hmm.
about like how I parse out my day. So like my typical day at EA I'd get there at like 9:30, and then I'd work until, like 7, and then I'd go home, I'd have dinner, I'd put the kids to bed, and then I'd come back and I'd be back at like 9, and then I'd work until maybe midnight. That's like when I'm crunching, right? Working
Mm-hmm.
really hard. So the
Right.
difference now is that I'm at home and there's nobody like I don't have to be there 9 to 7.
Mm-hmm.
So I get up now, I have a meeting at 9, then I go back upstairs, I hang out with my kids, I play with my kids a bit. I come back down, do a little work, go have lunch with my kids. Maybe we'll go on a hike in the middle of the afternoon, right? Like when they're, you know, usually I try to always hang out with them from like 3 to 5 o'clock or something, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm still working the hours, but the hours are like I work in the morning and then I work. My wife and my kids they all go to bed really early. So like
Mm-hmm.
they're all in bed by 9 p.m. And so like I'm up till 1 a.m. So
Mm-hmm.
that's like 4 hours that nobody's around that I can work and I'm not like losing that family time, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And
Right.
it's not like I don't always have to work. Sometimes I'm playing games or watching television or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
usually it's work. I am lucky too. I talk about like we're talking about like workaholic and crunching and all this, but like I do, I make video games. Like it's not like I'm digging ditches or,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, building walls or something. I'm doing the thing that I wanted to do since I was a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like I'm crunching because I have to. I want to. I want to do this. Like I enjoy doing it,
Right.
So
Yeah.
even though it's my job, it's also my biggest hobby. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Makes sense. And yeah, so like I said, the chapter is called Workaholics, and I will just now like touch upon a couple of like like milestones, I guess, that were covered in the book. And please, to every listener, this is not a substitution of buying the book. Please, if you really, really are interested in Zach's story, you should buy the book. It is great anyway, like Zach already told you. And you should have read the chapter and then maybe just jump back in, or I guess maybe read it meanwhile if you are like that skilled. I'm not quite sure if there's anyone out there, but feel free to do that. And you started at EA very early on, and I think this is one of the cooler tidbits. It was just like you were just like walking in, you just like looked at the company you were like obsessed with, like you really like their games, the games of Electronic Arts, and you're just like, I would just try my luck, put on like a nice shirt. I think I remember one detail; it wasn't tucked in, so I guess maybe this made the difference. And you were just like walking in, and then by mere coincidence, it was hiring day for a job as a quality assurance tester, like in QA, and just got the job, right?
Yeah, I knew that EA was like local, and
Mm-hmm.
I knew, so it's like this is the year 2000, so the internet is around.
Right.
It's not like what it is now, but the internet's around. So I looked it up, or maybe I saw on the back of like one of the boxes that the address was like local or whatever.
Right.
I found like, okay, I'm gonna like go down there, and at the time, like I think that it sounds like super ridiculous now, the idea of like just walk in, but like when I was growing up, in the like 80s and 90s, there's countless stories that people tell you of like, I put on my best suit and I went down there and introduced myself to the
Right.
boss, and that's how I got my job,
Mm-hmm.
and so I had like that story in my mind, that, oh, I'm gonna go down there and just like wow them or meet somebody, and
Yeah.
like why not? Why not
Mm-hmm.
try? At the time I was like working for like a little sort of video arcade place. And so it was like, and I had, it's like that job is fine. I can keep doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, why not try? So yeah, I went in, and they were doing the way that EA at the time used to hire QAs. They would hire people in big batches, maybe like 20 or 30 people, and then they would put everybody into like a 2-week training course,
Yeah.
test a game that's already released, and they would just check your like writing skills, your analytical skill, and just make sure that like you could do the job. And then most people would kind of pass from that training.
Yeah.
And so what happened is it was the day where all these training, there's like 22 other people in there, and they're all like me. They're like young. Was it all guys? Yeah, my training class was all guys. So it was all like
Mm-hmm.
18, 19, 20-year-old guys.
Right.
Just like a nerd fest. You walk in that room, it's just like nerd city. Me
Yeah.
too. Right? And so, I go to the front desk because I don't know what's going on. It's like a security guy, right? And I don't remember, I'm like, I'm here for a job or whatever I said. And he's like, I think he just looked at me. I looked like everybody else sitting in that room. And he's like, yeah, just go in there. Like, go in there. Like, he
Okay.
just assumed, oh, I'm here for that,
Right.
right? And so I just go sit down, and you're talking with all these other guys in this room, and like the HR people are like collecting paperwork or what, I forget what they're doing, but they have all this paperwork, and they're like, hey, what's your name? And I'm like, not on the list or whatever. And they just give me the paperwork. They're like, okay, cool. And I guess from their perspective, whatever, right? Like the worst case scenario is they pay me for 2 weeks. I don't pass the training.
Yeah.
And like, what does it matter to them, right? So I don't think that they like, the book makes it sound like I pulled like a fast one or whatever. I don't think it was like I tricked them as much as like, I just don't think anybody cared.
Yeah, right.
They're like, sure, yeah, come on in, right?
Yeah. And it was quite interesting. And then can you remember, like, was it difficult for you, like the first time you were tasked for like the 2 weeks to find all these bugs and write all the stuff down? Where you're just like, wait, this is child's play. Like, I can do this in my sleep.
I thought it was so easy, and like this is something that I already did at home.
Wow.
I was already into like pushing the limits. I'd already figured out that like, hey, when designers are designing games, they want you to do a certain thing. And then I would think about like, what do they want me to do here? And then I would try to do the opposite, like just to see, like
right.
When I was a kid, like if you found a bug in a game, we didn't really think of them as like bugs. We thought of them as like secrets, like, right, oh, yeah. Dude, I found this invisible wall and I got outside the world and it was like crazy, It's like, because you don't see, there's no like YouTube yet. So you don't see like this stuff,
Yeah.
Like where people put these videos out where they like, they do this stuff, And I was also like modding. I'd like figured out how to like, the first thing I figured out how to do was like a lot of games were using like bitmaps. And so you could go into like the folders and just look around until you found bitmaps, open them up, and like, Windows just has Paint. Paint will open a bitmap.
Yeah.
And then you could see like, oh, okay, this is like the art for the car or whatever. And then you just like draw on it with Paint and then load the game. And sure enough, there's like the thing. And for me, that was like amazing.
Yeah, I'm like mind blowing.
Yeah, like I put something in a video game. I like, I'm a hacker, like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, this is me at 16 years old, like,
yeah, totally.
clicking around in some folders and seeing what was there,
That was, it's crazy. And then, as the chapter describes, it's, you've just been trying to, but like to you, it was just a stepping stone. You wanted to become like more involved into game development. And so you put in like the hours, like you said before, you were just like, already back then, sort of crunching, even though I guess back in the day it was just putting in the hours. And then, you just became a producer. And I think the first title you worked on as a producer was the Simpsons game in 27, right?
Yeah. And I should mention that, like, back then, I don't know how it is now, but back then QA was hourly.
Okay.
So you did get paid overtime.
Oh, I see.
And they always, and so what would happen is, like, for me, for instance, like the first game I worked on was a James Bond game. So I was a tester on a James Bond game, and our hours were 9 to 6 or whatever. There's an 8-hour day. And I would come in, I would test the game for that 8 hours. And then there would always be like, hey, we have whatever other game that needs some extra testing tonight. And so we're going to order food, and can any, or do we have any volunteers? And I would basically volunteer every single day. Like, sure, yeah, I'll do that. Because first of all, it's a different game.
Yeah.
So it's like, I just played this game for 8 hours, but now I get to play like some other game. Second of all, it's like 18, I'd had some like sort of family issues at home. So I was living in my friend's garage at the time,
Right.
It wasn't like I was like really set up. I didn't have like a girlfriend or a family or anything like that. I didn't really have anything else to do. And so it was, hey, you can play this other game. We're going to pay you. So at the time I made $9. So then, or maybe it was $8. So then overtime would be like $12 an hour. We're going to pay you overtime. We're going to buy you dinner. And it wasn't, I think that like the typical cliche sort of thing is like pizza, like they just get you pizza every night, but that's not true. Like they were ordering like good, like catered food, where you got from a restaurant and like they would bring it in. And so, and maybe now I'd be like, oh, whatever, like that's not that good of food. But at the time, like, I was 18 years old. It's like, wow, free food.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, to me it was, and then it's just this opportunity to like see more games, see more, meet more people, just kind of build up within the company, right?
Yeah, totally. And yeah, like I said, then you went on to become a producer, right, for the Simpsons game.
Yeah, so I worked at Maxis as QA, and then what happened was we were over at a different location than the EA headquarters, and then the EA decided to close down that location and just consolidate, have us all move back to the headquarters building. So when they did that, at the same time, there was like a production group that was working on The Sims that I guess they just didn't want to, like, man, you work on The Sims for long enough and maybe you want to work on something else,
Yeah.
And so that Simpsons team was like the production team was from Maxis. It was a Sims team. It was like, hey, so it's kind of like an opportunity to transfer. And so when that happened, I'd already been, as like a QA lead, you're already kind of doing production work.
Yeah.
Like you're kind of doing half QA, half production work. And so, there were just some slots for producer, and like I had kind of paid my dues, and those guys had recognized that I'd done a good job. I didn't have to like ask; they asked me, which was cool. I still had to interview with a couple people, but like they came to me and said, "Hey, would you like to be a producer?" I think the guy really was like, "Why are you still in QA?" Is what he said to me. I'm like, I don't know. I'm just waiting.
Awesome, yeah.
Yeah.
And do you remember some of the like more obscure like restrictions when working with like the Simpsons IP? Was there like you can't make Homer say drink anything else besides beer, or say anything else you were like, please don't do this, or you're not allowed to do this?
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff like that, like, oh, you only drink stuff beer and these kind of things. I think that the funniest one for me was like, so there's this sequence where these like dolphins are attacking, and it's like fake. It's like I shouldn't say making fun of, but it's kind of like set up like Space Invaders, because I don't know if you played that Simpsons game, but it was the Simpsons are trapped in a video game and they know it.
Yes.
Right. And so there's all these like video game references in there. And so the wildest one for me was like we had these dolphins, and then we were putting like funny hats on the dolphins. And then the Simpsons people were like, you can't have the hats on the dolphins. You would never have hats on dolphins like that.
Okay.
And it's just like, what? So like the rules that they have a lot of rules that are like set in stone. And it's all about how the characters look from each angle, things they would say, things they wouldn't say, stuff like that. That stuff is fine. Like that stuff you expect. Kind of up front, they give you like a Bible of that stuff that's like, here's all the kind of like franchise rules. It's more the stuff that like when you're doing things like that, like dolphin hat, where it's like, is this really the opinion of the Simpsons or Fox or like Matt Groening, whoever's in charge of this, or is this just this particular person?
Exactly, yeah.
You know what I mean? And we had the same thing on Star Wars too. It's a very restrictive license, and we'd have these meetings where we're reviewing, and like there's 8 people in the room, but like, and look, they work for LucasArts and like that's their job, and I totally get it, but like part of me is like, they're going, oh, you can't do this, or you can't do that, or it would be like this, or it would be like that, and it's like, well, none of you are George Lucas.
Right, yeah.
You're just like me. You're just like me. You're fans. Like, I'm also just a fan. You know what I mean? Like, and now we're working on it.
Right.
Like, why do you get to say? Like, get George in here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I always had a hard time with that. Like, these, like, sort of lower level people. And I don't mean lower level, like, insulting. Just not the, like, person in charge.
Right.
Sort of making rules for us. And it's like, well, who says? Because it did feel like you could catch people, especially on Simpsons. We could catch them on the right day and get stuff approved that, like, if we caught them on the wrong day, it wouldn't get approved.
Yeah. And did you ever like sort of like sneak something back in, or like try to like just like reframe it, or just like, like maybe the dolphin hats, like not in the beginning of the year, but maybe at the end of the year, just like, so we decided to put on some nice hats on the dolphins, and they will look like this.
Yeah, I don't remember what happened with the dolphin hats. Maybe they ended up in like little space, like they couldn't. I don't know what it was, but
okay.
I'm sure there's a lot of stuff. I think that the method there would be more to just try to put stuff in, and if they don't mention it, leave it in.
Oh,
but
right,
once they mention it, especially if they mention it in like an email or something, no, you got to take it out because it's documented. And so like now you're probably like breaching contract or something.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So
yeah,
the Easter egg stuff when you're playing with licenses, you just have to be like super careful with that stuff.
Yeah, and is it like a hard balance for like the for example like the upper heads in the studio, like you need to convince them, and then you will also need to get like the blessing of like the Simpsons people? Like, is there like something like, I don't know, like for example like at the EA they would say, well, you can't have Homer do this, even though the Simpsons people said, oh yeah, that's totally fine. It's like might be like a difficult.
No, EA was pretty, at least my view on it, and I'm dealing with like an executive producer
Right.
At EA, and he was awesome. He's like part of the team. It's not. Sometimes you have that like disconnect of like, oh, this is like a person that's more of like a corporate person, but that wasn't the case on that game.
Right.
We felt like the EA really supported whatever we wanted to do, and they kind of knew that like there's a challenge of getting, there's already like gonna have to be a lot of stuff that gets approval, as long as the Simpsons people are good with it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, they're good with it.
That's cool. Yeah. And then you moved on to, I guess, a couple of games, and one of them ended up being Dead Space 2, which is like, pretty infamous for being like, one of the greatest like third-person horror shooters, I guess, like right up there with like, Resident Evil 4 and I guess a couple of other games.
Yeah, and I was a big, so when Simpsons ended, the way it worked was they basically asked everybody like, hey, we have these 5 projects going on, kind of list them in priority order of what you would want to be on and what you wouldn't want to be on. And the top of my list was Dead Space 1. They were just starting it up, I think, then. I really wanted to be on that game. The bottom of my list, I don't even remember what all the games were, but I do remember what the bottom of my list was, and it was Godfather 2. It was the sequel to Godfather, the open world. I really didn't want to work on it.
Okay.
Number one, I'm not a Godfather fan. Like, I just think those movies are, like, I don't know. I'm not saying they're bad, but like, as far as like people say, like Godfather 2 is the greatest movie of all time, I don't get it. It's not for me, you know?
Yeah.
So the material just wasn't exciting to me, whereas like sci-fi, survival horror is like kind of right up my alley.
Right.
Anyway, I ended up getting put on Godfather 2. And that ended up being a good experience because I got to do a lot of design work on Godfather 2, which I probably wouldn't have gotten to do on Dead Space. And, I met some really cool people that I'm still friends with to this day. So, like, it's not like I regret it or whatever, but man, I remember seeing that, like, the early stuff for Dead Space and really wanting to be on that game and really being disappointed that I wasn't on that game. And so I ended up doing Godfather 2, and then we did a game called Dante's Inferno right after Godfather 2.
Right, yeah.
And I was on Dante's Inferno, and that was like another great opportunity. I got to do a little bit of design work. I got to do a little writing for that one. I got writing credit. I got to work with some people that were doing, we did like an anime film adaptation. So I got to do a little bit of like help with that. I got to work, they never ended up doing it, but I got to work with, I don't remember what the studio was, but they were like testing out the idea of doing a movie, like a feature length movie.
Was it CG or was it like animated or was it?
No, like a live action movie.
Oh wow, okay.
And I don't know, like, I don't think they had signed anything, but they had like a writer, and so I got to spend a bunch of time with this writer working on like a test script for it. So that was like a really cool experience of just doing something different that I never thought I'd do. And then when Dante's was done, that's when they were doing Dead Space 2. And I moved over to Dead Space 2, which was awesome. I can't claim that I'm like some critical cog in that machine or that I had a lot of creative input on Dead Space 2. I didn't. I kind of came late to the project. They'd already figured out the game they were going to make. I helped run some meetings, take some notes. I helped do some DLC. I hooked up all the subtitles for all the cutscenes, just stuff that needed to be done. But it wasn't like, oh, I'm the guy that came up with that level idea or whatever. But a really cool experience, and to work on a game like that where the quality level was so high compared to the other games that I worked on, which were good. Like Dante's Inferno is a good quality game, but its Metacritic rating is in like the 70s, right? Whereas like the Dead Space games, Dead Space 1 was like an 89 and Dead Space 2 is a 90,
Right,
and not to say that review scores are everything, but like you said it, like Dead Space 2 it's a really good game.
Yeah.
And it's a really one of the best games ever in that genre. So that was really cool to get to be part of that. And then that just went straight into Dead Space 3. And so that one I did get to be more involved in, like upfront, kind of like from the start.
Right.
Getting to be in on those creative decisions and stuff. And so that was cool too. Yeah. It's a cool experience.
Yeah, and was it in the case here again where just like, well, like maybe Isaac could do this or this, and they were like, no, Isaac would never do this. You can't put hats on Isaac.
No,
Okay.
like I will say that Dead Space 3 was an interesting one in that there was a lot of I guess like corporate involvement from the company, but it wasn't about the fiction of what Isaac would or would not do or anything.
Right.
The studio was in control of that. I don't think they really had opinions on that, but they definitely were pushing for like, like there's microtransactions in that game. That didn't come from the team. That came from the company.
Right.
Even the game being co-op, wasn't maybe I don't know exactly, but I definitely remember the company really wanting it to be co-op and putting a lot of pressure on that, it being co-op. And I remember, there was kind of like one idea for the co-op that was a little more like survival horror based, and they kind of like shot that down, and we ended up with like kind of this generic soldier guy being, going along with Isaac rather than what we had originally kind of planned for that. And so, it wasn't that we were having to get things approved as much as just, man, they were just really involved because they wanted that franchise to really take off. And it just didn't with Dead Space 2, I think they expected more with Dead Space 2.
Right. And I guess you also moved on to was it like Army of Two, the Devil's Cartel, right? Was it afterwards?
No, so I actually had to leave Dead Space 3 before it finished. So
what right.
Happened,
yes, exactly.
That's a funny story. So what happens, we were working on Dead Space 3, and I was working on what's called like the vertical slice, which is basically, that's when we take a game, we figured out everything, the prototyping is done, and we go, okay, we're going to take this slice of the game and take it to final. And so that way people can play this and they can see, they can understand what
like
the
whole vision
game
and
like. Yeah. And so we were kind of wrapping that up. I'd been on Dead Space 3 for, I don't know, a year or whatever, and we kind of had the vertical slice, and we're working on some other levels. I was working on like the flotilla, right? So all the stuff where you're just flying out in space, going from ship to ship. And then I was working on all the stuff like after the crash land and all the like initial stuff on the ice planet. That was kind of done, so it's kind of time to like get on the next levels. And at that same time, EA had like, made, so they had a studio in Montreal, EA Montreal, and they had kind of like decided to put EA Montreal under Visceral, so they made it like Visceral Montreal. And our general manager, Steve, became also the general manager of that studio. Right. I should mention that studio helped us out a lot with Dead Space 2. They had like art there, and they did a level there, and they were helping us with Dead Space 3 as well. So it wasn't completely out of nowhere that they'd kind of want to merge the studios.
Right.
But it definitely was, they're very just culturally different, those two places. So anyway, long story short, Army of Two, the Devil's Cartel, which is the third Army of Two game, was just behind. They were struggling, and so Steve, our general manager, asked me if I'd be interested in going to Montreal for a couple weeks just to kind of like assess, and kind of like be his eyes there and just see what was going on. So I went for a couple weeks, and they had a really good, talented team, some good stuff. They just need a little more production help and organization, and so it's like, hey, can you stay? And then it's like, well, how long? And we just decided like, hey, let's just take it all the way to the end, which was going to be a year. And so at the time I was married, and so my wife came, and EA was really cool about it. They rented me an apartment, they paid my taxes, they flew my wife out. And so it ended up being, even though it sucked to leave all my friends for that year and to like not be there like to final Dead Space,
right?
It ended up being like a really good experience just living in another country, and especially Montreal. Montreal, obviously Canadian city, but feels like a European city.
All right, okay.
Part of that is just that like the primary language there is French, right?
So yeah, true.
Walking around and people are speaking French, and you just feel like you're in France a little bit,
Just like in Paris.
Right. And so anyway, culturally, it was like really good for me, and I made a lot of like lifelong friends in that studio, and actually I ended up bringing. That studio sadly got shut down, but I ended up bringing, because I had been there, I kind of knew, hey, there are a handful of people there. Everybody there was really good, don't get me wrong, but there were a handful of people there that were just rock stars, and they could do things with Frostbite that we at Visceral needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to like be part of, helping some of those people transfer and move, all the way out to California,
Mm-hmm.
which is like, it's just really, like I have a friend, one of my best friends, Beacon, was a guy I met in Montreal, and he ended up moving out to California and working with us at Visceral, and he ended up, meeting his wife there, and now
Wow.
they're about to have a baby, so it's like
Crazy, yeah.
it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of these cool like impacts
Yeah, yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
these little decisions make way later,
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it was I really enjoyed that experience, even though that game it didn't stand out as like some great game.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, you also became the producer of the Battlefield Hardline multiplayer mode, right?
Yeah, so I came back and they're like, "Hey, we're done doing this survival horror stuff. We're gonna do a Battlefield game."
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay.
Yeah, like what was the reaction like there in the like? I guess like somebody from the upper management came towards you, or like, well, this is like our plan, and where like what was like the like? Can you like maybe like sort of describe the reaction of the people who were just like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, so we at the time we had so like I mentioned earlier, when Simpsons ended, we had like 5 games going in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
So when Dante's Inferno stopped, I think that maybe, well, I'm trying to think. Yeah, that was maybe the last time that we had 2 games going at the same time. And then
Mm-hmm.
after that, there was Dead Space 3, and there was this little prototype team that was making like a first-person shooter.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that first-person shooter just kind of evolved into Hardline. Basically, one day we had a meeting. Our GM comes back. He says, "Hey, I was talking with the guys at DICE. They really want to do this Battlefield Cops and Robbers game, but they can't. They just don't have the bandwidth.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it'd be a good opportunity for our studio to work on a Battlefield game.
Right.
We were feeling the pressure of like making money, because we knew
Mm-hmm.
corporate had gotten so involved with Dead Space 3 that we knew that like, okay, there's concern about the sales, that
Mm-hmm.
we're not making enough money. And so Battlefield was this huge franchise.
Yeah,
So I
gigantic.
think that there's some of us reacted like, good, this is a good opportunity for us to kind of like make something that's going to make some money, to kind of like, you're always worried that your studio is going to get shut down, right?
Right.
And it's like a big franchise and all that. I think there were a lot of people that were really wanting to make Dead Space 4. I think all of us wanted to make Dead Space 4. So the reaction was kind of, some people left, they're like, well, that's not the type of game that I would make. I
Yeah.
think some people, were sad but stayed. And
Mm-hmm.
then I think that there were some people that were excited, like, hey, it's something fresh, it's something new. They'd done a bunch of Dead Space games already.
Right.
We can always come back to Dead Space after this,
Right.
Um, and so yeah, it was just a really like sort of mixed reaction. And then we had already been hiring people for that first person shooter I was talking about. So
Mm-hmm.
they just went right on that, and they had never worked on a Dead Space game. So it was like, great, Battlefield, cool. That's a big franchise.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then yeah, shortly after, I guess I mean you shipped the multiplayer mode, and like the game was pretty successful from I guess what was written in the book. And then you also made like some DLC and stuff. And then I guess the next step was the Ragtag project, right?
Yeah, so I think that, Hardline, I mean, it certainly sold more than any other, any of the Dead Space games or
Yeah.
Dante's Inferno or any of the other games we had been making recently.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it did as well as other Battlefield games.
Right.
But I think that they must have known that, because it was kind of a weird, like, Cops and Robbers isn't what Battlefield is typically, right? So I would assume that they didn't expect it to sell, the same as Battlefield 4 or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like the Ragtag thing is interesting because that actually all happened while we were making Hardline.
Oh wow,
So
okay.
while we were making Hardline, that's when EA signed the deal with Disney to do the
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars game. And so we were told, hey, like, we're going to make a Star Wars game after Hardline. And at the same time, we hired Amy.
Mm-hmm.
It might have been a couple weeks. I don't know exactly the timeline, but it was essentially like, hey, that's right. We were making it before we hired Amy. We had a team that was like working on something. And then we hired Amy a while later. And then, she came in and like was like, okay, cool, we're going to make this. And she had like her vision. And so it became that. And then we finished Hardline. And then most of the people from Hardline went over to her game,
Mm-hmm.
but there were still 50 of us that were working on premium for the next year.
Right.
So for that year, probably the best year of my career at EA, because like my boss was like, run it. Like I had full
creative control and stuff, right?
autonomy.
Like,
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah. And so, and the company just seemed like they weren't paying too much attention. It was like they sell premium, right? And premium is, hey, you're gonna get 4 maps every 3 months, right? There's like every 3 months there's gonna be a drop. Each drop is like 4 maps, a new vehicle, and like X number of guns.
Right.
As long as we kind of like hit that checklist, they weren't really like worried about what the maps were, or like, nobody seemed to be bothering us. And so it was like really, and we had this tight little team, like of 50 people or so, and we were really like, we were all playing the game and playing with the fans that were playing the game. And so it was really fun to like have that instant feedback loop, and then just to be like kind of no creative handcuffs, just make what you want. And we put some cool Easter eggs in the game. We had a lot of fun that year, for sure.
Okay, yeah. And you were just mentioning Amy, and you're talking about Amy Hennig, who's like famous for the Soul Reaver franchise, and also her work on Uncharted. So yeah, like what was it like? Like maybe you could describe like the first time like meeting her, like you just said you hired, like EA hired her, and then she just came into the team. Like what was it like to like the first few interactions? Was it just like, did she came here and was like, well, I wouldn't think about it like this or like this, or was it really daunting to talk with her, or was it just really like it just clicked and it worked really, really well?
Yeah, so, well, the interesting thing is she's already worked for a year. They're working there while I'm doing premium. So when premium ends, they're like, okay, premium, that team is now going to go over to Ragtag.
Right.
And maybe it was too early for the team to get that big. Maybe they weren't quite ready for it. It's like, it's kind of like the pace you should work at versus, well, these people are available, go, right?
Right, yeah.
And so for me, I guess I had met Amy, but I didn't really know her at that point. And so, they kind of like, they put me on Ragtag and they're like, hey, you're going to produce the levels, right? And that's like, okay, cool. Like that's a big job. It's like designing the level. Well, I'm not, it's like I'm managing the level designers. We're designing all these levels, all the story is told through these levels, right? There's a lot going on there. I'm definitely going to have to be like in lockstep with Amy. And so I basically just, we started like doing level kickoffs where it's like, okay, we're going to start this level. Like, let's have a kickoff where we sit in a room with Amy and she kind of just runs through everything she knows about the level as far as story and gameplay and all the things she wants. I was probably intimidated like before I talked to her, but she's like, she's just a game maker. Like once you talk to her, you realize like, well, number one, she knows her stuff.
Right.
She's really smart. And like, you can tell right away, like the way she's talking about mechanics, the way she's talking about level flow, the way she's talking about story, like she just knows her stuff. And so right away you have like a lot of confidence when you're speaking with her that the stuff that she's talking about is going to be good. The track, and honestly, the track record doesn't really matter. Like, yes, she made those games. Like I'm not really a big fan of the Uncharted games. I played them a little bit, but like to me that didn't matter. Like I'm just going to judge someone on how they are, with me. And she was great. Really enjoyed working with her. I think that it was very apparent as soon as I joined the team that there was going to be a challenge in that, like, she wants to make the best game she can make. And EA is like kind of on a timeline, and that timeline might not line up with her timeline. And, you get to this point where it's like, okay, what's going to give here? Quality or time? I'll tell you what, if Amy's on your project, it ain't going to be quality.
Right.
No. It's not. It's just not a sacrifice that she's willing to make, and I respect her a lot for that because it's really hard at EA to kind of like push back against that, And so yeah, like I really enjoyed my time working with her. I took a lot from that year or whatever, even though we didn't finish the game. Just seeing how she works, seeing how she, manages. I had never like worked with such a heavy story before.
Right.
Just seeing how she sort of manages all that, and how she, she can sort of react to like different things that emerge as you're designing the level. For me, it was a really positive experience working with her. The fact that we didn't get to finish.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess one of the next steps that was covered by the book was just like, the sudden shutdown of Visceral Games. So yeah, well, like I think one of the pages describes it quite vividly that your second son was born, and then somebody from the upper management, I guess from EA, called you up and said like, yeah, they wanted to talk with you, and then they came over, and then they just directly told you and your wife that they were shutting down Visceral Games, and that the next day I guess you went to the headquarters, to the studio. And then people were already quite like some of the people were like really happy to see you, but some already like thought it was kind of fishy that you were there, even though you were on like maternity leave, I guess, and or parental leave. I'm not quite sure if it's called like that. And then could you maybe like sort of go into like, I think it's because it sounded like just the way it was described to me in the book, it sounded really like dreadful. Like the atmosphere was like, I guess, like really, really thick atmosphere inside that room, because I guess some people were like really like, it's, I think in the book made it quite clear it's never a good sign when like a sudden of like meeting like of like the entire crew gets called upon, and then they had to just I guess what was the atmosphere like the moment before they announced the shutdown, because you already knew, so maybe you could go into detail about this a little bit.
Yeah, it's hard to say because I already knew. So like my view of it is kind of like colored by that. Like you said, I had someone at EA who was very good friends of mine, who's pretty high up, knew that I was like on paternity. Paternity. So it's maternity for the mom. It's paternity.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah. So I'm on paternity. I'm supposed to be off for like a month.
Right.
And so he came over to my house and kind of just, he's like, look, we're really good friends. I want to give you the heads up. This is happening. Da, da, da. So I had been at Visceral since it became Visceral, and so I felt like, okay, like there's going to be this meeting the next day where like Visceral is going to end. Well, I was at the meeting where Visceral started. And so I just felt like I need to be there, like I need to go. And a lot of people, at this point, I've been at Visceral so long, and I'm a manager for a lot of people. I've hired a lot of people. I've recruited a lot of people. I've had people move out here from Montreal to take jobs here. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I'm pretty like heavily involved with like this studio, not just the games at this point. And so I felt like I needed to be there. So I go there. First person I see is this guy, Marquise. He's an artist. Great guy. He's just stoked for me that I had the baby. He's just super happy for me. So he runs up, gives me a hug. He's like, congratulations, dude. Awesome. What are you doing here? Doesn't even come up, which is funny.
Right.
And so no one in the moment says to me anything other than him. I immediately go in, we sit down. Patrick Soderlund, Jade Raymond, our GM, they're all on stage. So and Amy's like not on stage. So like, okay, this ain't about the game. I mean, I already knew, so it's hard for me to say, but talking with people afterwards, a lot of people were like, yeah, no, we knew once.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there were some struggles going on with the team and like managing, merging with Vancouver, I mean, that's like, I don't know if we talked about that in the book even, but that's like a big part of it is like, you have this like team come in from Vancouver and they're trying to like, just, we should be making this different game. For me, like personally, my opinion with that is like, hey, like we have Amy here. We brought Amy here to do this.
Right.
Like, don't come on the team and on day one start questioning her. Try to like support her instead, and it's just a big sort of political. Amy just wants to make a good game. And there's all these people from Vancouver like jockeying for like power. And it's like politics.
Right. Yeah.
And like, I don't think Amy cares one little bit about like corporate politics. She just doesn't care. It doesn't. It's like, what a waste of her time.
Yeah. Totally.
She needs to be writing script and all these things, right? And so there's these struggles or whatever. Anyway, so everybody knew that was going on. Like we had an executive producer from Vancouver who like prior to this game, his other previous 2 games had been canceled. We'd be in meetings with this guy where it's clear he doesn't want to be here. He's like, I don't know what the guy's deal was,
Right.
So everybody knew things weren't going good. So now you have these execs, you have Soderlund and Jade up there. It's like pretty obvious what's coming. Yeah, they just go, hey, it's closed down. They always kind of do the thing of like, we'll find jobs for you guys. So it's not, you're not being like laid off.
Right.
We're just closing your studio. and then, if there are positions available you elsewhere in the company that you want, right? It has to match up. It's not just to have a position, but you have to want it, because sometimes that means moving or whatever.
Yeah,
right.
Mm-hmm.
So I handle that, and I will say that like EA as a company, like the logistic part of that, as soon as that meeting's over, they handle it really well. You get assigned an HR rep. They talk you through all the available jobs. If you end up not taking a job or they, not finding a position, they're really generous with their severance package, all their benefits, all that stuff. They do it right. It doesn't make it any easier, but they definitely, like, EA as a company, policy wise, they treat people in those situations, as well as you can treat them in tough situations like that.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just a kind of a bitter pill to swallow, obviously, like not getting to finish a game, and a Star Wars game, like,
right. Yeah.
We were all like, this is kind of the biggest opportunity of our entire careers. It's a Star Wars game. It's like really big time, and it's Amy, and like it's high quality. Yeah, it's just to really sort of, it kind of turned me off to the company, So when they sat me down, they're like, "Hey, you know how to make games at EA. You can pretty much work anywhere.
Right. Yeah.
What are you interested in?"
Right.
And I, at the time, this is really funny now in retrospect because they're making it. But at the time, I told the HR lady, like, "Hey, yeah, where I want to go is wherever you're going to let me have a team to make a skate game."
That's true.
Like, I'll move up to Vancouver because that's where they made it, and we can go hire the old people that made it. And the other side note here is I'd already been beating the drum for a skate game behind the scenes.
That's true, yeah.
So I'd talked to finance about what the financials for skate looked like, and they actually looked pretty good. As far as like, hey, you could make it for this much money, and like if it sells this many copies, we think we could sell this many copies. Like the finance team was like, yeah, there's money to be made here. We should reignite that franchise.
Right. Yeah.
So I was like really excited. I reached out to the guys. There were a couple guys in Vancouver that still worked on it. So I was like, hey, would you be in if I could get this going? Like I sit right here. I can walk over to corporate and just try,
Right. Yeah.
And they were super excited about it. Yeah, let's do it, and they were already secretly kind of working on it, like making some of the stuff work in Frostbite and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So then I like put together like a quick pitch and get, somebody to hook me up with a meeting with somebody in publishing. I won't say who.
Okay.
I don't want to badmouth them, but
totally
I go to this meeting and I'm like, hey, we need to do this game. The Olympics are coming, like in 2020, this is gonna blow up. Skateboarding is gonna blow up again.
Right. Yeah.
And we could have the game ready for that. And it's already the best skate game. The Skate 1 through 3 are the best skate games ever made. Like we just build off of that. People want it. I'm plugged into the skateboarding community. They want it so bad,
Right.
We can do all these things. And basically the end of the meeting, like it told me, yeah, the problem with this game is that the market is skateboarders, and skateboarders spend all their money on weed.
Nice. Yeah. That's totally
like,
accurate.
Dude, stupid, like embarrassing, like
right.
Think, like to me, the whole thing was just like, oh my God. And so anyway, I go to HR when they're like, hey, where do you want to go? And I'm like, yeah, give me a team to make skate or I'm out. right? Which is a ridiculous plan. And so I'm out.
Right.
They're like, okay, we're not going to do that, which, man, they ended up doing. So kind of wish the timing had worked out. I totally would have moved to Vancouver and worked on that game. I would have been QA on that game. I don't care. Like any role in the
Yeah, right. I mean, like since we're already talking about it, like what does it make you feel when you see like now like Skate is coming back and now also Dead Space, where you're just like, well, I told you people a couple of months ago, like what happened now? Like are you kidding me?
Yeah, I have different feelings, mixed. So
right.
Those are two different things. Skate is a game that I love. I never worked on a skate game.
Right, yeah.
I don't have any connection to the skate games. I'm just so happy they're making another one.
Right, yeah.
I have thoughts about like what they did with 1, 2, and 3, specifically around career mode. And that's really what I was interested in, is like revamping. Like all the mechanics and the way the game works is great. Like just keep that. It was about revamping the way that career mode worked to make it a little more like realistic. There's always this like thing with skateboarding, whether it's Tony Hawk or the skate games, where they always like force the career mode to be like a little bit goofy.
Right, yeah.
Like, what's up, dude? You gotta like throw the watermelon off the roof. And
right,
like
yeah.
Not like an accurate representation of like what skateboarding culture is actually. It's kind of like just the sort of jackass part of it, you know?
Yeah.
Bam Margera part of it, and that's cool. I like that part of it too, but like there's just more to it. And
Yeah,
so
right, totally.
I wanted like a little more of a serious career mode.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, like now they greenlighted, I'm just stoked, and I'm so happy for
That's
the
awesome.
guys that I know how bad they wanted to do it again, and
Yeah.
so like I'm really happy for them. I'm like, I don't know, a little jealous or envious. Like I would love to work on that game, but
Right,
like
yeah.
I don't have any. Like I'm just really excited to play it mostly.
Right.
The remake of Dead Space is a little like trickier
Right, yeah.
because like number one, that was not only is that a visceral game.
Mm-hmm.
The real truth of that is that like normally like a studio creates a game, right? Like
Right.
Naughty Dog created Uncharted.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy thing about Dead Space is that there was no Visceral Games. We were just called EA Redwood Shores.
Mm-hmm.
Dead Space created Visceral Games. We
Right.
put Dead Space out, it got that huge review score, and it became, that game is such a vibe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that game is like, it's so like well directed. And so we became like, oh, these guys do like mature rated, like action, gore,
Yeah, right.
like really good. Their VFX team is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we rebranded to Visceral after Dead Space came out,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so like, and then of course, like you work for a studio like Visceral, and for as long as I did, and it becomes a little bit of like your identity. Like I'm that guy
Mm-hmm.
from Visceral. A lot of us felt that way, like Visceral,
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so, and at the same time, I worked at EA Montreal, and I saw how poorly EA treated that studio,
Mm-hmm. Right.
making them make a 2 game they didn't really want to make, shutting them down after that. Like they would never get to do their own game,
Right,
like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
always have to help someone with other games. And
Mm-hmm.
like there's such an amazing group of talent at that
Right.
studio,
Mm-hmm.
and they just shut them down and let them go, and then they reopen them, right? And then their motive, and they're working on like Jade's game, and then Jade leaves, and they're
Mm-hmm.
like, helping with this and helping with that, and like they get to do Squadron. That's cool. Finally, they got to do something that
Yeah.
like they pitched that they wanted to do, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
And then it's like they're doing Dead Space.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so it's like, okay, well, man, it feels like you just closed Visceral. In 2017 is when Visceral was closed.
Yeah,
I
right.
believe 2016 is when we pitched this. It might have been 2015, but we pitched exactly this. A
Wow,
Dead
yeah.
Space remake.
Mm-hmm.
A Dead Space 1 remake with like some updated graphics, some like, some new content,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much exactly what they're saying. At the time, their attitude was like, that's not a thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
remake, what? And
Right.
then RE2 remake came out
Right,
and
yeah.
did so well. And so my feeling is that they basically just were like, oh man, we should have done that Dead Space remake. Let's do it now, right?
Right,
I
yeah.
hope I'm wrong. I hope that it was just somebody at EA Montreal had that idea and they really wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It seems a little odd to me, that
Yeah,
like
right. The timing, yeah.
the timing is weird, and then you're bringing in all these like former Ubisoft people to like run that team.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to like original Dead Space team members about like, hey, did they reach out to you? Did they reach out to you? Like, why wouldn't they like try to get some of these guys? I think, look, the thing about Dead Space is like when you make a game that good, like obviously you have like a lot of talent on there.
Right.
And like now we're, 13 years later, everyone's kind of moved on to bigger and better things. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe none of them would have wanted to come back anyway.
Yeah, right. But I mean, the gesture would have been nice, right?
Yeah, and so like the whole thing for me is like just mixed feelings, and like I have nothing against the team there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I hope they do really well, and I'll play the game, and I'm excited, and replaying Dead Space 1 recently has me more excited to see what they're going to do with it.
Right.
It's more just about the corporate treatment of the studio that I worked
Yeah,
at.
yeah, right.
And
Makes sense.
how
Yeah.
we were treated and how we were told that the kind of games you guys make just are no longer viable in the market. PUBG is the future and all this nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kind of the classic EA thing of like, they're just always a year behind.
Right,
they're
yeah.
always facing like, hey, you could have been the first one to do survival horror remake, but instead you waited and let Capcom be the first one. And so now you're a follower, right?
Right.
Or, hey, like you waited too long.
Mm-hmm. Right,
There's
yeah.
freaking skate in the Olympics today, and there's no skate game to sell to market around it.
That's
like
true.
you waited too long, like you missed the boat. I'm still excited for the game, but like
Yeah,
this
yeah.
was the time to release the game, you know?
That's true, yeah. Uh-huh.
So it just feels, and so my frustration is more just at the company of like this, like they're not learning their lesson,
Yeah,
and they're
yeah,
always
right.
sort of following and chasing.
Right.
There's the same thing on like Battlefield Hardline, where like they had this idea of premium.
Mm-hmm.
You buy the game for $60, and then you buy a premium pass for like $50 or $60, and then it gives you all this content
Right.
for the next. And like when we were doing that, it felt like that idea is just like a little dated.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Right.
this idea just feels a couple years old. Like you wouldn't
Yeah.
do this anymore. And they're just like doing it, you know? And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so it just felt like, man, you're behind. You're gonna wait until this fails before you like adjust, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Right. Uh-huh. So it's like,
So
yeah.
I do have mixed feelings about the whole thing, but it's
Mm-hmm.
tied up in a whole lot of like weird emotion that like
True.
I don't want like somebody from the team that's making it now, and
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
friends that are on the team, to hear me say something and feel like I'm upset at them, because I'm totally not.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's bad. I just think it's like the whole thing is.
Yeah, yeah. I think that has been quite clear from the the way you talked about this. And well, you know, yeah, since Visceral Games is now, no longer in existence here. Yeah, I have one random question here. Like, did you take the knives with you that once were sent to you?
I did. I haven't.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I still would love to know like why. Like where did those come from?
Right.
Why did you send these knives to us?
Are they the quality knives?
Yeah, they're like really high quality, like
Wow.
I don't know, like it's a very specific like style knife, but it's like a, a butcher knife almost.
Oh, wow. And
I gotta think it's like maybe something about Dead Space, like the gore and cutting off limbs or something.
maybe,
But
yeah.
like it's so, I mean that showed up like while we were working on Hardline, or maybe right after Hardline or
Right.
something. Some people were like, "Oh my God, is this a threat?"
Mm-hmm.
Like they're gonna slice us up or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, maybe they wanted to just work you faster, you know, because in Counter-Strike, once you put out the knife, you run faster and everything. So maybe they just wanted to enhance the development speed. It was like a passionate fan who couldn't wait about the
Right.
DLC, right? Makes sense.
Take this knife, run faster through the hallway.
Yeah, I mean, this was also a funny tidbit because I think in the book it says like you were always running through the hallways at EA. I think
Yeah.
maybe with the knife would have been even better. Just
I noticed actually not working at EA, because it's like I was running through the hallways, I was running up and down the stairs.
right.
I was constantly on the move.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'm not overweight or anything, but man, I've definitely put on some pounds.
Yeah, right.
Working there, where like, oh man, I was just getting this built-in exercise all day. I was not getting it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then, you just moved on to Crystal Dynamics for a couple of months. And then I think this was the one quote I found was really, really interesting. I think also maybe it's a good segue into like maybe talking about the crunch culture a little bit, or like the issue with the games industry. And the quote goes like, give me a second. Oh yeah, at Crystal Dynamics, I look around and I don't see a lot of people older than me. When I started, everyone was older than me. That was 18 years ago. They were 30 or 28 then. Where the fuck are they now? So, yeah, so like, do you think the industry has like an issue with maintaining people who are like maybe your age? Don't want to say that you're old, but I mean, let's call you like a veteran of like who spent already like a couple of like lots of years in the industry. And do you think this is like the industry is only like really suitable for like the let's call them like just younger folks who just make their first game and then they sort of burn them out? And then they leave them like on the roadside, and only like a couple of people, like I don't know, like the legends like Amy Hennig and Tim Schafer, for example, are like able to maintain this because they're just like industry icons.
Yeah, and they're both in positions where they can kind of control it,
Right,
right?
yeah.
Like
Mm-hmm.
just the sort of nuts and bolts developer, right? The
Mm-hmm,
person that's just sort of working on a game, but they're not necessarily the creative director or whatever.
Exactly.
I don't see a lot of them, older than me. It's not that they don't exist, but that quote is exactly it, and I was at EA too. It's like, well, what happened to all the people
Right.
that were, and what happened is they all go off and they end up going to indie, or they end up working at other companies, or they end up like leaving the industry and doing something else.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just didn't, it just felt like, man, this industry, it's like you kind of have this moment to like take a breath, where it's
Yeah,
like,
right.
okay, like I'm like doing something different, and it's like a new environment now.
Mm-hmm.
Going to this new studio is nothing against Crystal Dynamics. I
Yeah.
like, and I really liked that studio, the
Mm-hmm.
culture they had there. I liked the people there. I liked the game. I just like had my own personal issues, with
Right.
like, and maybe it was just like I wasn't, like emotionally ready. I don't know, but I just had like, I'm there working and I'm feeling bad about not working hard enough, and
Right.
everybody else putting in the work, and yeah, I really like, I hate to like use the term depressed because like that's a clinical term, and there are people out there that really struggle with like
Mm-hmm.
real depression,
Yeah, right.
and I've never had like suicidal thoughts or anything
Yeah,
like
right.
that.
Mm-hmm.
But I was depressed. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was not myself.
Mm-hmm.
I was just not there, and needed, something. At the time I didn't know what I needed, but I needed something.
Yeah. So then you basically left the industry for like 1 or 2 years, I guess.
Yeah, I kind of thought like, hey, that's what, like, where are all those other people? They all left the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's what I need to do.
Right.
Or I either need to like dive all in
Mm-hmm.
and just go right back to it, or I can like, you know, get out. And I think that the other thing, it's in the book, but we didn't talk about it. And so for anyone listening that didn't read the book, the other like little detail is like during Battlefield Hardline, with exactly 1 year until we were done with that game, my first son was born.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I took a couple days off, and then I was back at work. And I like saw him every day, but like I wasn't there when like he maybe started crawling, or I wasn't
Right.
there when he
Yeah. Yeah.
started like walking, or I wasn't there when he said his first word or whatever. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I'm getting updates. Okay, I didn't really think anything of it. It's like that's the way life is, like
Right.
that's the same with like my dad is at work, and like
Mm-hmm.
it is what it is. And then, like you mentioned, my second son was born 2 days or a day before they closed down Visceral. And
Mm-hmm.
so what happened is they closed down, and I'm like, I'm taking all my leave
Right. Mm-hmm.
before I do anything, before I make any decision. I'm
Yeah.
going on leave, and so
Mm-hmm.
like I spent the first, and that's October, and then November and December. So I spent, 2.5 months, just hanging out with the new baby, and then
Mm-hmm.
you just realize like, oh man, I was like missing out on
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff that like
Right.
I don't want to miss out on, like.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so then it was like, well, I gotta like, not do this. And at the time, and so that whole time off, I knew I was going to start at Crystal in January. I got a
Mm-hmm.
phone call the moment Visceral closed from Crystal. So
Mm-hmm.
the guy who's the general manager of Crystal was the executive producer for the Simpsons game.
Mm-hmm. Oh
So he
wow.
hired me for my first production position, and he was like, hey, he called me and he was like, hey, I know you got a lot going on. We don't not need to talk at all right now. I'm just letting you know, whenever you want to talk, I have a spot for you. Just let me know.
Right. Yeah.
And so
Uh-huh.
that allowed me to like, number one, go to EA and say, hey, give me skate or let me go,
You're right.
with a
Yeah.
lot of confidence, right?
Exactly.
With a
You're
lot
right.
of confidence, which felt really good. I felt
Yeah.
really cool, walking in
Uh-huh.
and
Like a rock
making some
star.
crazy demand and just walking out,
Yeah.
and yeah, like the HR, the poor HR lady that had to deal with me just didn't even know what to, they ended up transferring me to like the head of HR because she just didn't know how to deal with me.
Right. Yeah.
And so, knowing that made me like not have to think about anything. I just
Mm-hmm.
totally unplugged and like just focused on being a dad, and
Right.
then realized like, oh man, like I missed out on a bunch of stuff. And then Crystal starts in January. So
Mm-hmm.
I go, but I already going in there, I was like, damn, like I'm missing out. And so my mind is like working 100 miles an hour. Like, how's this going to work out?
Right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I'm trying to make it work. It's like, I'm trying to like go home for dinner, but it's kind of the same thing I was doing before where I'm like sneaking back to work and just, and even if I am around, it's like I'm tired from, working so
Yeah.
much.
And you're also
So,
thinking about the stuff, right?
yep. And so at the, I had lunch with a former EA employee who was going to the startup, and it was like architecture and construction, and he
Mm-hmm.
was telling me all about it, and I was like, yeah, that sounds crazy. I don't know why you're doing that. And then like maybe a week later, he hit me up, and he's like, hey, we need like production. Like
Right. Mm-hmm.
they don't have like any organizational methodology here,
Mm-hmm.
and we just need someone to like manage the structure of like this architecture department, and
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Right. Mm-hmm.
just be, the other thing was just be on site. Like it's up in Seattle, and like the corporate headquarters was down in Menlo Park, and so it's like we need like a director, and so they're giving me like this big like corporate,
Mm-hmm.
director of architectural project management. It's like this, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, it's like stock shares, and like, like, and
Yeah.
it's a startup, and so it could do really good,
Right. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like
Uh-huh.
theoretically it was a unicorn startup,
Mm-hmm.
which is like there's only ever been a few of those, and the other ones are all like Amazon and Google, like things that did really well. So it seemed like almost like a can't miss proposition.
Right.
And it was just like, okay, cool. Like it's 9 to 5, and we can move away from the San Francisco Bay Area, which is where both my wife and I grew up, but we were kind of just tired of living there. Like just so many people have like moved there that it's not the same place we grew up anymore.
Yeah, right.
And we wanted to live somewhere a little more, just closer to nature, a little more rural. And so we thought, the Pacific Northwest, let's go.
Right.
And so we took it. I took it, and we moved the whole family and left the industry for I worked there technically, I think, for 2 years. But the truth is I really only worked there for like a year before I was starting to work on games on the side.
Yeah, right.
And it was like pulling me and distracting me.
Yeah. And well, have you ever visited that budget hotel room in Austin that you worked on while on that construction company?
No, I haven't been to anything that, of all the projects that we worked on, there are hotels in Texas. There's also in Florida, and then we're also, I don't know what happened because that company, by the way, went bankrupt recently.
Oh wow!
It didn't work out for them.
Oh okay.
So it's a good thing I left anyway.
Well, maybe it's because you left. Maybe it's like yeah, right.
Maybe.
I think you always have to spin it like that. Well, obviously they went bankrupt.
I'm gonna take that and just run that.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly.
Well, once I left the company, they couldn't hold it together anymore, and they went bankrupt.
Exactly. Yeah, and with EA, you can just say, well, they took my ideas with Skate and with Dead Space, and then now they make like their fan favorites now. You see, like it's just the way you spin it. So
yes, while we're at it, Apex Legends, also my idea.
Awesome, yeah, that's a great game. I love to play that.
That's not true, but I'll take credit for it.
Like you know what? I don't like at this point. I don't care anymore. You could tell me anything. You could tell me like I don't know. You could tell me you invented Star Wars, and I would be like, yeah, that's Zach's now doing. All right. And and then you got it reminds me of the like quote from like Scarface. It's like every time I think I'm out, they pull you back in, and then you went back to the indie game development, and then you went up and like creating the like sort of strategy game Airborne Kingdom, right?
Yeah, they had already. So basically, one of my friends had reached out to me and said, "Hey, can you we're working on this game."
Right.
Just me and these 2 other people who are also really good friends of mine. So it's 3 people that were really good friends of mine. The 4 of us used to all sit in like a little area together. So like, we're pretty close friends.
Right.
And anyway, he's like, "Hey, would you mind checking this out and just giving us feedback?" Sure. So they send me like the demo, and I'm playing the demo, and it's like I really like city builders, even though I've never worked on a city builder.
Right. Yeah.
I've always been a fan of the genre, RTS as well. I've always been a fan of that genre. Although I'm not a StarCraft player, which is weird for like an RTS fan, but I don't know why that one never connected with me. But like Age of Empires and Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 3 and all these types of games. Anyway, I'm playing it. I'm like, man, it immediately, I hadn't really thought about, games since I had left EA as far as making them.
Right.
And I'm playing this game and it's really good. And I have all these like, it's sparking like this creative, like, oh man, it would be cool if did this, this, and this. I started having like ideas for it. I was getting really excited about it. And so, I was like, hey, is there any way that I can like invest? At the time I was feeling, I'm a director at this big, startup. Like I got a little extra money. Like, do you guys need money? I can give you some money. I just want to be involved in some way. And so I was like, sure, yeah, like we'll take an investment because like it'd be great to have your name, connected to it or whatever,
Right, yeah.
Just another person out there pushing it, and I've got connections and maybe I can help in some way. And then like, it became like, hey, we could also use like a little production help, and it would be really easy because there's only 3 people. I'm used to producing teams of like 200 people, and so, it was relatively easy compared, it's like when you're managing the schedule for 3 people, it's not as tough.
Right.
And dependencies and coordinating between 3 people just isn't that hard. And so I was like, hey, can you help out with like production? And so we kind of like worked out a deal for that where it's like, hey, I can like part-time sort of do production. I was having this thing where, like I mentioned earlier, my family all goes to bed at 9 and then I'm up till 1. And so like, man, maybe for 6 months or a year, I was like playing all these games in my backlog and watching movies that I haven't seen before. And like, I was filling that time really easy.
Right. Yeah.
And then I got to this point where I was like, I didn't have anything to do. I was was like, man, I need something to do. Like,
Right.
and I started like writing music again. I was like, maybe I'll write an album. I was like, I just need some kind of creative outlet.
Yeah, right.
And so, it's like, oh, I'm starting to get connected to this thing, and like I'll give them feedback, and that'll be a creative outlet. And then at some point, I'm like, we're going through the schedule. I'm like, hey, we need to build this, we need to build this, we need to build this, we need to build this. And I'm like, hey, what's the deal with the like land beneath? Like the world, right? Like we have all this planned out of how we're going to build the city builder. We haven't really thought about how we're going to build the world. And it's like, yeah, we need a level designer. And I'm like, cool, I'll do the level design. So it was like, okay, that's like when the leap was really made, where it's like now I'm like checking in files every day. And so I'm like working 3 hours every night on level design. And of course, the more time I have, the better it'll be. And so
crunching again.
No, I wasn't really crunching.
Just
I was
kidding.
like working a nice pace, but in a way, because I was also working this other job, but they're so separate. And then I started like taking meetings while I'm on my other job, and like I'm not a thief, I'm not feeling good about this.
Right.
And even though I was making up that time and I was still getting my job done, but I still felt bad about it.
Sure, yeah.
And then like this is getting like really weird, but this is all tied together. So there was this journalist who I forget who he worked for, but essentially the Prince of Saudi Arabia had this guy killed. What was his name? Jamal?
Oh,
Do you know who I'm talking about?
I think so.
Was murdered. He was murdered in like a consulate or whatever.
Right,
and so the I forget the name, but like the Prince of Saudi Arabia was found responsible, and he's also part of like the Vision Fund, which is like this fund of like these billionaires that fund these startups. And I find out that like the startup I'm working for is funded through that. And so I'm kind of like looking at my paycheck like,
wow.
And then I start digging into the other corrupt shit that like this prince has got going on.
Right.
And just like feeling like, dude, this is like not clean money. Like I'm not like, this is like dirty, I'm man, like I don't like my money is coming from a source that like
it's like blood money.
I have real moral problems with this, like, and so like that, it's like combined things, where it's like, I think I'm just done here. I don't think I want to do this anymore.
Right.
Like, I'm done, and like there were other little things that I was kind of struggling with at that company, but that was kind of the big one that was like, okay, I got to get out of here.
Yeah, sure.
So and so then I quit and started, and then it was like, okay, all ahead on Airborne Kingdom full time. And that's when I kind of got into the like I work mornings and nights and I spend my afternoons with my family.
That's awesome. Like I said, it was really like a really awesome story in the book, and also nice to hear all the like great anecdotes. And I think maybe moving on to like one last segment, and I guess I'm gonna sort of establish that with all the other interview guests as well. So it's like, what do we do from now here? Like, what is it about crunch? Like, I think there are like a couple of things you said that are kind of like really, also a bit scary, to be honest. Like, I think one quote was like, I think there are a lot of people who are wired, like in this case you, the way, and you're one of them. And you're a huge part of the problem. And if you're like a really smart executive, you just hire people like you in this case, and that are wired this way, and then they will crunch no matter what, even though nobody told them to. So like, what do we do from here? Like, how do we stop like somebody who's like, well, I listened to this podcast and I read this book, and Zach made a really smart point. I will just fund my new company and I will just only hire talented Zachs, and they will deliver me the new Apex games and new Star Wars games, and it will be just great.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that, Jason, the author of the book, I think that he's been pushing for a long time. It's like unions, right? Like,
right, yeah.
We need to unionize. I'll be honest with you, like I don't know enough about like how unions work to like, really speak on that or be an expert on that. I see what's going on right now with Activision Blizzard.
Right.
And like, man, it feels like that's like, I saw a thing today, like they're like officially now a coalition.
Right.
And with King and Activision Blizzard, the employees have like formed this coalition. And so like, I look at that as like, well, maybe they're like starting to take steps towards unionizing there. And if that happens, then like maybe a lot of the industry will follow.
Right.
I don't think there's one like magic solution, wave a wand or whatever. I think it's going to be like kind of a slow little bits of change at a time. I have friends that work for major studios that still crunch, and they're still working late hours and all that. So it's not fixed by any means. And certainly like they're happy to like kind of take advantage or to let people just like work that want to work and not really stop them. And I don't see the companies, why would the companies stop doing that? You know, like
Yeah, right.
work from home, it might actually be a little worse, you know, because it's like, well, my computer's right here and at home, I can just work anytime, you know,
right.
and yeah, I don't know, you know, I think it's about like having responsible studio leadership, responsible publisher leadership.
Right.
My concern for, you know, AAA is that I don't these big corporations are not being run by people that really care about the medium.
Right.
You know, like they don't really care about video games. They care about the video game industry. They care
Yeah, right.
about like finances of it all. But it's like, you know, Bobby Kotick ain't a gamer. He don't care. Andrew Wilson ain't a gamer. Andrew Wilson's a marketing guy.
Yeah.
He don't care. You know, like these executives, like they don't. It's just a business for them. Like
Right.
EA is a marketing company. They just happen to make games. But what they are is a marketing company. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And so like, yeah, I don't know. Like if you really wanted to like change the whole industry, I think it starts with that corporate leadership. And I think that the people in positions of leadership at the big companies, they ain't going to get it done. Bobby Kotick ain't helping anybody else out. He's helping himself out. You see what this guy makes.
Yeah.
You know, guys pulling in millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, you know, the people working on Call of Duty are still crunching and getting paid good, you know, nice salaries, but not. He's getting life-changing money every single year. Every single year, he gets enough money that if you or I could have 1 year, a half of 1 year of his money, we're set for life. And our kids, our family's set for life. You know what I mean?
Totally, yeah.
So there's just this giant gap right now between like the business people and then the actual developers. And like, man, those business people like making money, so they're not going to try to slow that down.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's greed. You know.
Totally, yeah.
And unfortunately, you know, they can just keep they work you until you're done and you move on, and then there's 1,000 kids fresh out of college that want to do that job. Like. Literally 1,000, like thousands. Like there's endless people that will do anything to be like a game developer.
Right,
you know what I mean? So there's not a lot of sort of leverage. Right? It's like, you know, there's no. I made like a Kobe Bryant analogy.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like Kobe Bryant stays after, you know, regular practice and keeps practicing to get better and better and better because he knows that like there's, you know, 1 million kids like breathing down his neck trying for that position, right? And so he needs to stay being the best, right? And like, man, like to be the best, it just takes time and time investment. And like at some point people are going to have like other things in their lives, you know, family is the usual one, you know.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, well, now they're being pulled pulled in another direction, you know. And yeah, I don't know. I hate to be like, it's a negative way to sort of end the conversation, but yeah, I just don't know. I don't feel hopeful about AAA. You know, and I do feel hopeful about indie, and I think that, you know, these people that have come from AAA and are making indie, and you're just seeing like more and more amazing indie games, and indie games reaching a quality level they never reached before, and hopefully, you know, supporting their employees in a better way than the AAA. Hopefully it's more human because these are smaller companies, and so you're more connected directly with the people. I look at a company like Supergiant, you know, and I'm sure that those guys do work some overtime and all that, but like, you know, the guys that run that company really, really care about their employees.
Yeah, totally.
They're not just running the company; they're also part of the team, right? So, like that's the difference. Andrew Wilson on my ain't part of the Battlefield Hardline team.
Oh, really? Wasn't he?
You know what I mean?
I thought he was responsible. I thought he was responsible for the balancing. Maybe I'm mistaken.
No.
Okay.
So I think that when those executives are kind of disconnected, development. I mean, they're not. You know, it's like these aren't even game developers. Was Bobby Kotick ever a game designer? I don't think so. I think he's just always been like a corporate guy.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
Right. That connection isn't there. That like understanding isn't there. That empathy isn't there. You know.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Give Amy a CEO job somewhere. You know, put Tim Schafer in charge of Activision. Put Amy in charge of EA. You know.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
That's the way. Is get some of these like veteran visionaries in our industry. Like
Right.
Warren Spector shouldn't have to be begging anybody for money.
That's
Warren
true.
Spector should be the one handing out the money. You know what I
That's
mean?
that's true. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, before we close this off, I have one couple of tiny questions before we finish off this interview. And yeah, I think we touched upon lots of topics already, but maybe we missed something. So, is there anything you wish that people would know about the reality of the games industry that maybe we didn't touch upon?
Um, no, I mean, I think that it's pretty, we kind of touched on it a lot, and it's just that idea that like, man, it's a lot of hard work,
Right.
and you kind of have to like advocate for yourself
Mm-hmm.
once you're in,
Right. Mm-hmm.
because yeah, that these big companies aren't going to advocate for you. But
Mm-hmm.
no, I think kind of, I don't have any more secrets.
Right. That's totally fine. Yeah. And overall, do you think it was like, was it worth it in the end?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, like we just ended the conversation on a negative note, and like I know like because of the nature of like the evolution of my career, like we end up talking about like the negative part of it, but like man,
Mm-hmm.
I love my time at EA. You know, 90%, 95, 98% of my friends are people I met during my time in EA.
Right.
Um, like I met my wife while I was working at EA, not that she was working there, but like,
Mm-hmm.
it's like I if I wasn't working there, then maybe I wouldn't have been at the place that I was at the time that I met. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the
Totally.
butterfly effect,
Sure.
right? Where,
Mm-hmm.
and so in the end, it's like most of my memories there are really happy, and
Right.
like I really enjoyed it because like most of the time I was crunching at the time, that's what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So like
Right.
I can talk about it now as a negative thing, but
Sure.
like at the time I wanted to do it and I had a great time doing it. And like I have some like great memories from just late nights working with people
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of the inside jokes that you come up with and just
Yeah. And resting at 2 a.m.
yeah, all that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
All right then. And yes, so the one last segment is, I think, yeah. Before we close off the show, I wanted to. I tend to have sometimes a topic that's called lessons learned. So maybe you just maybe tell us a little bit about something maybe that you learned from a couple of women from the games industry you've interacted with. So maybe even though it is negative or positive, I will leave that up to you. And I will just throw you over four names, and then you will tell me like something that you learned while working with them or interacting with them. Does it sound good for you?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, all right.
Okay. The first one is Yara Kuri.
Okay, so yeah, Yara. And let's see, I started working with Yara first on uh Dead Space 2, I guess, and then we
Mm-hmm.
worked together on Dead Space 3 and then on Hardline. I would say that the thing that I took most from working with Yara was like and I don't know if she was always this way, but like by the time I became friends with Yara and worked with Yara, I felt like she was a very good like self advocate.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't afraid to like speak up on her own behalf, which I was like I'm older than her and had been around longer than her, and like kind of always just did what I was told and took my lumps, and like I would see her push back in a way that was like, oh, we can do that. That's cool,
Mm-hmm.
like that. I'm she's speaking up for herself, and that's awesome. Like you can advocate for yourself. I know it sounds so dumb, but like you just kind of don't think about that when you're used to just taking orders and doing what you're told.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And what about Virginia MacArthur?
Yeah, I mean Virginia, I kind of owe everything to her. She really like gave me my shot. Um, she was the one that I was in QA and I was like a lead tester working on her stuff, and like she she basically started giving me production tasks. And so even though my first production job I didn't work for her,
Mm-hmm.
it was because of her. She was the one that got me that job.
Right.
She had actually tried, funny story. She had tried to get me a production job 2 years earlier,
Oh wow.
and general manager turned
Mm-hmm.
it down
Mm-hmm.
because I used to play pickup basketball with him, and I was kind of a jerk. I was like a little immature. I had like a temper on the basketball court, and so he
Mm-hmm.
was like, "This guy's not mature enough to handle this position or
Right.
whatever."
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, she kept like advocating for me, and yeah, I mean, yeah, the thing I learned the most from her is just like Virginia did not care about whose title was what.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she just cared about people and like
Right.
the people working on the game. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, we all have our own responsibilities. But like, she didn't, to be a QA person like I was, and to go on like the trips, like she would bring me because we would work with like third-party developers.
Right.
She would bring me on those trips. She would bring me to like the ship parties.
Mm-hmm.
She would like bring me to every like major meeting. I got to sit in meetings with Bing Gordon, where we're like pitching the idea. And of course, like I'm not talking, but still I got to be
Mm-hmm.
like in these like meetings, which was like a really, really big deal.
Wow.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Okay, then how about Jade Raymond?
Okay, so I didn't work with Jade a ton.
Mm-hmm.
Jade came in and sort of like took over managing Motive and Visceral. I think that I would love to talk to her again now that she's not at EA anymore, because
Mm-hmm.
like I wonder what that was like for her.
Right.
I got the sense that like they hired her because of her name,
You're right. Yeah.
like as a PR thing,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't really want to like. There were just things that happened with her where we were pitching games and she was supporting something that we were doing. She was really supportive, and then would come back and like someone above her shot it down.
Oh wow.
And it
Okay.
was kind
Mm-hmm.
of like, well, you're the one, like, you know what I mean? It's like I felt, and I could be wrong about this, but I felt like she got kind of used for like PR.
Oh
Like,
wow.
yeah,
Okay.
we're gonna like
Mm-hmm.
Jade out there and wave her name around a bunch and show that like we've got this like big industry star, Jade Raymond.
You're
Look
right.
at Jade Raymond, Jade Raymond,
Mm-hmm.
and so, but I didn't get to like personally interact with her a ton.
Okay. Sure. Uh-huh. And last but yeah, not least, Amy Hennig.
Yeah, so Amy, it's like it's quality. It's the attention to detail and quality at a
Mm-hmm.
level that like I've never seen anyone at her level like be that involved in every single aspect
Right.
of a game.
Mm-hmm.
Like like I mentioned, I manage level designers. We come back and like, you like punch a hole in a wall or whatever, and then she would have feedback on like the shape of the hole in the wall.
Mm-hmm.
She was so specific about like pacing
Wow.
and the pacing of the game and how the player is going to react to this.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like for her, like just attention to detail. Before, I'd mentioned I got to do a little writing
Yeah.
on
Right.
Dante's Inferno.
Mm-hmm.
And before her, I kind of had in my head that like I wanted to be more of a writer,
Mm-hmm.
and like then just witnessing her as a writer and like how much better she is than me,
Yeah.
like wow, right? Like she just, and like the way that she writes like story in a way that's conducive to making a game.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes you have a story and then you kind of got to put the game in there. And her thing was like, it was all encompassing. Like she had it all,
Right.
and that hyper detail,
Mm-hmm.
and her ability, similar to Virginia, her ability to
Sure.
like not see people's titles. She didn't
Mm-hmm.
care. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the level designer she worked the closely with, that she had on our kind of most important level right before we got canceled, was our most junior
Oh wow.
guy. Like they had a connection. They connected for whatever
Mm-hmm.
reason. They were just vibing with each other, And oftentimes like you'll see people they want somebody senior and they want this and
Right.
that, and she just she was very much like merit based. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you're doing the work, then she's about it,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I
Yeah.
man, it's probably like one of the biggest regrets of my career that I did not get to like finish that game,
Mm-hmm.
just for the experience of like shipping a game with her, shipping
Right.
a Star Wars game, all
Mm-hmm.
those things,
Yeah. Totally. And yeah, I guess even though it is filled with regrets, the last sentence, what a wonderful episode we had. Thank you so much for coming into the show. I had a blast talking to you about this.
Yeah, and I had fun too, and thanks for having me. And it's always fun to kind of, oftentimes when we get invited, developers get invited to do any kind of interview, it's
Right.
either very like one game focused or
Mhm.
very like question answer, question answer. It's less. I really like that this was a discussion. It's
Yeah,
always
yeah.
fun to just talk about the industry and what we do and stuff. So thank
That's-
you.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, before we end this episode, so where can people find you? And yeah, what is upcoming for you in the next couple of months, years, besides waiting patiently for the release of Skate?
Yeah, so if you want to find me personally, I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Zachulon, Zachulon. I have a game out, Airborne Kingdom, came out at the end of last year. It's available on the Epic Game Store. We will be releasing on consoles sometime. I don't have an exact release date yet, but like we're looking at hopefully the end of this year, so pretty soon here. And yeah, that's it. That's what I've got going on. I'm gonna be playing a lot of Skate, playing a little Dead Space right now. If you're interested in Dead Space, we're doing there's a big, it'll be out by now. There's a big deep dive we did for Dead Space on MinMax, which is a YouTube channel, and we basically, myself and four other people, played through the original Dead Space, and then just in detail in two like big 3 hour chunks, we just break down all the nitty gritty little details. So if you're interested in Dead Space and kind of reliving that's a fun thing that I'm working on right now, finishing that up.
That's awesome, yeah. And yeah, if you enjoyed the show, you can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. We are at Yumi Industry. And if you want to follow me personally, I'm at Dorian Chow on Twitter and on Instagram. And I guess we're also on Facebook. But I think all the recent guests shamed Facebook for almost everything. So I will still plug it. You can follow us on Facebook, but I will likely be banned in the very near future. And I guess that's it. Thank you so much. I hope there will be a couple of more episodes like this for this Press Reset Jason Schreier special in the upcoming month. And please check them out and also give Zach a follow. And I will listen to you in the next episode. Take care, everyone. Bye.